They said he was no longer useful, and by the end of the day, he was the only reason they still had a company. For 35 years, Mr. Harris had walked the same marble floors, unlocked the same creaky storage closets, and mopped the same long hallways of Granton Enterprises, a towering glass and steel building that touched the clouds. He wasn't in the meetings where million-dollar deals were made. He didn't wear a suit or carry a briefcase. But in his quiet way, he had kept the building alive. He knew which windows rattled in the wind, which elevators needed coaxing to close, and which security cameras were blind spots the guards never noticed. Outside, people hurried past him without a glance. Inside, executives greeted him with a polite nod and sometimes not even that. But to the night guards, to the delivery drivers, and to the handful of employees who worked late, Mr. Harris was more than the janitor. He was the one who made sure their path was lit when they stayed late. The one who always kept a stash of instant coffee in the break room for interns burning the midnight oil. The one who, a few winters back, had stayed behind during a blizzard to keep the heating system running so the pipes didn't freeze. Yet the new CEO, a young, sharp-edged man named Curtis Vale, didn't see decades of loyalty. He saw redundancy. And one Friday morning, Mr. Harris was called into the office. The meeting lasted less than 5 minutes. A sheet of paper slid across the desk. A short thank you. A handshake that didn't quite touch skin. Budget cuts, Vale said flatly. We appreciate your service, but it's time to move forward. Harris gathered his mop, his gloves, and the small tin lunchbox he'd been using since the 80s. He left without a scene. Outside, the sky was already threatening rain. That evening, Harris sat in his modest apartment, staring at the faded photograph on the wall, him and his late wife, taken the year he'd started at Granton Enterprises. He didn't have much saved. He wasn't sure what came next. But he did know one thing. He wasn't going to spend his last years bitter. He made a simple dinner, turned on his old radio, and tried to let the day go. But around 9:47 p.m., a faint, high-pitched sound reached his ears. It wasn't from his building, it was coming from blocks away. A fire alarm. He stepped to the window. Through the rain, he could see a faint orange flicker in the distance, near the upper floors of Granton Enterprises. Inside that building, the night guard, Ethan, was frantically trying to locate the source. The sprinklers weren't activating in one section, and the security cameras showed nothing but smoke. The new CEO had cut back on maintenance and hadn't approved the repair request for the old fire system. As smoke spread, panic grew. The emergency response time for the fire department was delayed due to a pileup on the main street. Every minute counted. And somewhere deep inside, Harris knew no one else would know how to reach that section in time. Without thinking twice, he pulled on his old raincoat, grabbed the heavy-duty flashlight he'd kept since his early days, and headed out into the storm. By the time he reached the lobby, security guards were shouting into radios. "What are you doing here?" Ethan yelled. "I know where it's coming from," Harris said, already moving toward the East Service elevator. He didn't wait for permission. He moved with precision, down narrow maintenance corridors, through locked doors whose codes he still remembered, and up a stairwell that hadn't been used in years. When he reached the storage level, the smoke was thicker, rolling low and hot along the ceiling. He knew this place, knew exactly where the outdated fire extinguisher panel was hidden behind a supply rack. With one swift motion, he pulled the pin and aimed into the heart of the fire. The hiss of foam filled the air. It wasn't easy. The heat was intense, and his lungs burned, but little by little, the flames shrank, retreating into nothing but steam. When the fire department finally arrived, the danger was over. The building was still standing. And most importantly, the servers holding millions in contracts, financial records, and private data had been spared. By morning, the news had spread across the company. Some employees whispered it in the elevators. Others posted about it online. The janitor they fired yesterday just saved the building. Curtis Vale stood in his office, staring out the window as rain streaked the glass. He didn't say a word when Harris walked past to collect the last of his things. But there was a flicker in the CEO's eyes, the kind of flicker that comes when a man realizes he's been looking at value all wrong. Some debts aren't written in contracts. Some heroes don't wear suits. And sometimes, the person you underestimate is the one holding your world together. But what Harris didn't know was that the fire wasn't an accident. And the man who had started it wasn't done. They thought the danger was over, but the real threat had only just begun. After the fire, the atmosphere in Granton Enterprises shifted. The employees looked at Mr. Harris differently, like they were seeing him for the first time. Even the CEO, Curtis Vale, offered him a cautious thank you. But Harris wasn't interested in recognition. He just wanted to return to his quiet life. Except something gnawed at him. During the fire, as he'd rushed into the storage floor, he'd noticed something strange. The flames hadn't started where faulty wiring usually sparked. No, the fire had been concentrated in one locked room, far from any electrical lines. And the smell, it wasn't burning insulation. It was accelerant. That night, Harris got a call from Ethan, the night guard. "There's something you should know," Ethan said, his voice low. "The cameras on that floor were wiped manually. Whoever did it knew exactly what they were doing." Harris frowned. What was in that room? Old archives. Contracts. A few files from before Vale took over. Ethan hesitated. Rumor is there were documents in there that could ruin him. It made sense now. The urgency, the secrecy, the wiped footage. Someone had tried to destroy evidence. And the fire had been the cover. The more Harris thought about it, the more he realized. Saving the building might have put him in danger. 3 nights later, Harris was walking home when he sensed it, the quiet sound of footsteps behind him, matching his pace. He turned into a side street, pretending not to notice, but his grip on his flashlight tightened. Then came the voice. "You should have stayed out of it, old man." From the shadows, a figure stepped forward. Tall. Wearing a hood. A faint glint of something metallic in his hand. Harris's pulse spiked. This wasn't just a threat. This was the man behind the fire. But Harris had lived through more storms than this. He'd fought through loss, through years of being overlooked, through nights alone in the dark. He wasn't going to back down now. "You think I'm afraid of you?" Harris said quietly. "No," the man sneered. "But you will be." Before the man could take another step, a voice echoed from behind. "Police. Drop it." Ethan emerged from the shadows with 2 officers. He'd been tracking suspicious activity near the building ever since the fire, and he'd suspected Harris might be a target. And when the police searched him, they found not just a lighter, but a USB drive loaded with stolen company data. In the weeks that followed, the truth came out. The arsonist was a former contractor paid off to destroy the archive files. And among those files was proof that Curtis Vale had been siphoning money from employee benefit funds to pad executive bonuses. Vale resigned under pressure. The company appointed a new CEO, a woman who had started at the company as a receptionist and knew every floor as well as Harris once had. They offered Harris his job back, with a raise and the option to work fewer hours. He accepted, but not for the money. He accepted because sometimes the best way to protect something is to be there, quietly watching when no one else notices. Kindness is powerful, but courage is what gives it teeth. When you act from integrity, not for applause, not for recognition, but because it's right, the ripple effect is unstoppable. People may underestimate you, overlook you, or even try to erase you. But truth has a way of surviving the fire. And when it does, it changes everything. Just when Harris thought peace had returned, a letter arrived in his locker. No name, no return address. Inside, 3 words. "This isn't over." Harris stared at the note. The letters carved into the page like the writer had pressed too hard, almost tearing the paper. It wasn't a threat. It was a promise. Visual. Harris locking the note in his desk drawer, glancing over his shoulder as he walks through the quiet maintenance halls. He didn't tell anyone, not even Ethan, the night guard. He didn't want to drag anyone else into something that felt unfinished. But over the next week, strange things started happening. Lights flickering in areas he'd just fixed. Locked storage rooms, left open in the morning. A shadow on the security feed, their one frame, gone the next. Harris wasn't the type to believe in ghosts, but he knew patterns. And this pattern meant someone was inside. One night, while doing his rounds, he heard it, the faint click of a door shutting 2 floors down. He moved quietly, years of sweeping corridors teaching him how to make his footsteps vanish. Visual. Dimly lit hallway, Harris's silhouette approaching a door, slow heartbeat sound effect layered under the score. When he reached the archive floor, the one where the fire had started weeks earlier, he saw a figure crouched near the main server rack, sliding a small device into place. Harris didn't yell, didn't run. He simply stepped forward and said, "You've got about 10 seconds before I call the cops, or you tell me who sent you." The man froze. Then, slowly, he turned. It wasn't the arsonist from before. This was someone new, but with the same cold, watchful eyes. "I'm cleaning up unfinished business," the man said, smirking. "You have no idea what's in those files." Harris took a step closer. "Maybe not. But I know one thing. You're not the only one who knows how to clean up messes." And with that, Harris yanked the fire alarm. Siren screamed. Within minutes, Ethan and the police arrived, catching the intruder before he could destroy anything. It turned out the man was hired by a shell company, the same one linked to the first arsonist. Someone out there still wanted the truth buried. But the files he tried to destroy? They weren't just financial records. They contained proof that Granton Enterprises had been covering up safety violations for years, violations that could have cost lives. Thanks to Harris, those files went public. The new CEO doubled security, implemented safety reforms, and gave Harris a permanent advisory role. Visual. Harris walking the halls again, not just as a janitor, but as the quiet guardian of the place. Sometimes, the smallest light in the darkest hallway is enough to show the truth. And the hands that sweep the floors can also sweep away the lies. But the real threat was still hidden, and it had been watching him all along. Visual. Harris frozen in place, keys in his hand, as the faint echo of footsteps moves behind him. Music, low, resonant bass rumble. Harris turned toward the sound, nothing. The corridor was empty, the emergency lights casting long, pale shadows on the polished floor. "Who's there?" His voice bounced back to him, but no reply came. Then, from the corner of his eye, he saw movement, a reflection in the glass of the office door. A figure stepped back into the dark. The next morning, Harris checked the security cameras. Oddly, every feed from the second floor between 11:47 p.m. and 12:01 a.m. was blank. Not static. Not glitched. Just black. This wasn't a technical fault. It was deliberate. Someone had cut the feed. Harris knew the second floor well. It was closed off for renovations years ago. But he also knew the truth. Behind those locked doors were offices belonging to departments that no longer existed on paper, but still had their lights on at night. That evening, Harris took his master key and walked to the forbidden floor. Every step felt heavier. And when he opened the first office, the air was cold, stale, like no one had breathed in it for years. Until he saw the desk. Fresh coffee. Still warm. Harris was about to step closer when the lights cut out. The door slammed shut behind him. A low voice came from the darkness. "You've been a problem since the fire." Harris didn't move. "Who are you?" The voice chuckled. "Wrong question. You should be asking, what are we still doing here?" A faint glow illuminated the man's face. Not the same intruder as before, but someone older, sharper. "You saved the building," the man said, "but this building isn't what you think. Every floor you clean is a mask, and the real floor is hidden where no elevator can take you." Before Harris could speak, a noise from the hallway, Ethan's voice shouting his name. The man slipped away through a back door Harris had never noticed before. When Ethan broke in, the coffee cup was gone. The desk was empty. No proof anyone had been there. That night, Harris lay awake, replaying the man's words. Every floor you clean is a mask. The real floor is hidden. Visual. Montage of Harris studying blueprints of the building, his finger tracing to an unmarked section deep below ground level. Some truths aren't buried, they're built on top of you. And sometimes, protecting the light means descending into the dark first. 1 week later, Harris found a key taped to the underside of his locker. A single tag hung from it, handwritten in black ink. Basement 5. Subscribe to my YouTube channel, Beyond Unseen Tales, to follow for part 2. Thank you.